Pretend we're more people.
You make a lot of noise, David, so it sounds like there's a lot of people in there. If you're watching online, you think we have 1,000 people in the room. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. Marsha, perfect. Okay. Oh yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Marsha. No one's gonna know.
Well, the whole point of making noise is people should know.
They won't know that it was you making all that noise. Unless Robert tells them. I'm not saying.
Okay, let's see who's joining us online. If you are watching, please say hi so we'll know you're here. You're there anyway, right?
You should tell them you have a whole different buffet and we're very scared that they're getting out.
Yeah, it's Chinese food tonight, yeah.
They'll be sitting room only next week.
That's, yeah, exactly. Whoever's watching online, you're missing the buffet, yeah. Shawarma was great, huh? There you go. That's the spirit. Okay, I don't see anyone chatting with us. If you're watching, say hi. Well, Rusty O'Neill is watching from Texas. Good evening. And of course, our loyal Art Cuban is watching from Michigan. And well, here we go. The Bergs are watching online. Joseph Butler is watching online. Shalom from Pennsylvania. Hope you're well and healthy. And Gail is well, healthy, and wealthy. Okay, let's begin. A fascinating class. As always, tonight's learning is in the memory of Yitzchak and Yosef. His soul should have an elevation. I also hope you'll all join us for a beautiful concert Saturday night. It's going to be a lot of fun. Zat Hashem. Okay. Hello, Judd. Judd is watching us from Michigan. Hello, Judd. How are you? And hello, Harold from Oregon. And Ravit is watching us. And Kim and Michael are watching all the way from Kings Point. We're very far away. Okay. So, to say a great joke about this atheist who's on the train. The young, yeshiva student is sitting next to him on the train. And he's studying the Torah, reading this Torah reading. And he's like, wow. Hello, Sarah, how are you? And as he's reading the story in the book of Exodus about the splitting of the sea, he's like, wow, I can't believe it. Can you imagine this crazy? It's going on and on and on, like in tremendous excitement from the tremendous miracle he's reading in the book. And the atheist can't handle this religious kid is reading the Bible and getting so excited. So he asks him, what are you studying that you're getting so excited? So the young kid tells this atheist, this big professor, says, don't you realize the Jewish people were trapped in the desert and God split the sea for them? And I'm just reading how God blew this wind and split the sea. It's amazing. It's just wonderful. And the atheist can't handle it, says, you idiot, don't you know it wasn't a real sea? Historians and archaeologists, they proved it was a little river that was only 4 inches deep. It was a pond, it was a puddle. It was 4 inches of water that came seasonally. And the wind came and opened it up. There was nothing there. Oh, what are you talking about? There was no splitting of a sea. It was a little pond of 4 inches of water. Don't get so excited. Okay, so Shiva boy says, okay, fine. He sits down quietly, keeps on reading. 2 minutes later, like, wow, what an amazing miracle. This is tremendous. The guy is getting really anxious. Now what are you excited about? I told you it's only 4 inches of water. He says, yeah, I just read that God drowned the entire Egyptian army in 4 inches of water. So you all know the story of the splitting of the sea, right? This you all know. You've seen the movies. You've been at the Seder. We know the story of the Jewish people left the land of Egypt. They start traveling. The Torah describes to us exactly the details of their journey. And we're going to talk about this journey a little bit. And I'm going to talk about the spiritual dimensions of this journey even more. The Torah tells us that where did the Jewish people go when they were traveling, when they were leaving the land of Egypt? So it tells us that God didn't want them directly straight up to the land of Israel. Why not? Who's familiar with the geography? I have a little bit of a map here. If you have the paper, you have a map. That's why I was rushing a little bit. I was trying to get some good maps. On the paper, I have the screen, the whole PowerPoint that I found. I'm going to share with me. But if you know the geography a little bit, to go from Egypt to Israel, what would be the best way to go? Smaller, you mean a smaller? No, I'm just joking. Straight. You go straight up. Egypt is south of Israel. If you go straight up from Egypt, right to the Sinai Desert, you'll be in the Promised Land. What's the problem? What's the part of Israel that's right next to Egypt, along the coast? One of our favorite places. No, Goshen is in Egypt. Goshen is a land in Egypt where the Jews were. If the Jews would have gone straight up from Egypt in the south, straight up to Israel, you come to Gaza. And Gaza was always a problem place for the Jewish people. Back then, you know who lived in the area of Gaza in the south? The Plishtim. Not to be confused with the modern day Palestinians. There's nothing to do with each other. They sound similar with a P, but that's where it ends. The Plishtim, who were always enemies, and Amalek was there. And Amalek would have attacked the Jewish people. I made a mistake there for a second. And Amalek would attack the Jewish people. And the Jews, God was afraid, would get demoralized. The nation that just came out of slavery was not yet ready to fight a war for their independence, for their freedom. And therefore, in order to avoid the Jewish people going straight up and coming along where they might be attacked, so what does God do instead? All the way around. And we'll discuss a little bit which way exactly God takes them, but he takes them not on the straight path. So it says, verse number 18, Vayaseh Elokim Asam. God, he traveled the Jewish way. Maybe that's why Jews always travel like crooked. You never go straight. Like, they say there's a Jewish thing. You can scratch your ear like this. Why would you do it like this? They went, over. So they went around, Derech HaMidbar, via the desert, Yam Suf, towards the Yam Suf. Towards the Yam Suf. What is the Yam Suf? Here in this translation is translated as the Sea of Reeds. What does the word Suf mean? Reeds. If you're familiar, I'll stop the sharing for a second, with the story of Moshe being put into the basket, and his sister Miriam was standing in the reeds to watch. She was standing in the soup. She was standing at the edge of the water. She was hiding in the reeds to see what would happen. So the Jewish people don't go straight from Egypt straight to Israel. They're going around. We'll see how around. And they're going Yam Suf. They're going to this ocean called the Sea of, in the classic reeds, also known as the Red Sea, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Now, what happens? Jewish people go, and what happens? Tell me what happens. It's not in the text, but you should know the story. What happens? Anyone? Someone chatting? We went on a sightseeing tour. It went. Actually, went to Eilat, but it's not Eilat. We'll see what happens. Pharaoh sent spies. First of all, good evening, Jessica. Thank you for the beautiful message. Hello, Carmen. I'm glad you're joining us. Pharaoh sent spies together with the Jewish people to see where they were going, what they were doing. Now, if you remember, the Jewish people had not officially said they're going out of Egypt forever. Officially, what had Moses asked for permission to do? A 3-day journey to go to the desert, to pray to God, to bring sacrifices. We didn't know what sacrifices God would want. We took all of our cattle. We borrowed stuff with us. We was borrowed. Officially, we were going to come back. And this is all part of the plan, by the way. It's also like, oh, God changed his mind. You know what? We're having too much fun traveling. Let's keep on going. This is all part of the plan to trick Egypt and the Egyptian people to chase after the Jews in order to eventually drown them in the ocean. We're going to read in this week's Torah reading. I'm going to talk about that in 2 minutes. So this is all part of the plan to harden the heart of Pharaoh, to make him want to chase after, not only him, but all the people, to chase after the Jews. So the spies come back after 3 days of traveling with the Jewish people. Say, they're not coming back. So now 3 days back, and then that's a good question. The question was, did they not notice there were spies there? Moshe took with him an Eruv Rav Ala Itam. It says in the verse that a tremendous multitude of mixed nations went up together with the Jewish people. When the Jews left, many Egyptians came to recognize the greatness of the Jewish people. They externally or pay lip service to saying, wow, we love the Jews. We want to be with the Jews. And God was not in favor of this. But Moshe made a mistake, if we can use those words, in thinking that it'd be better for the Jewish people to have a lot of converts, even if it's not the best quality, not such a strict process. The same mistake that was made throughout history, where we got confused by the allure of numbers, of quantity, over the strength of quality. The power of the Jewish people has always been in our quality, not in our numbers. like the most delicate part of your heart, right? Of your body is your heart, let's say. Your heart's not the majority of your body. It's the most important part, right? So that's how it works. So the Jewish people are not about a numbers game. And Moshe allowed them to come along, and sure enough, from within that area of Rav, people are not really loyal to the Jewish people. And after 3 days already, they saw this is not just a 3-day prayer service. This is a real commitment. And we're not doing that. They went back to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He motivates and talks all the Egyptians into following him, into chasing after the Jews. They weren't all so excited about it at first. Many details, but I don't want to get distracted. I'll never get to the story we're talking about. And eventually, Pharaoh himself harnesses his own horse, his own chariot, and they go and they chase after the Jews. Okay, now let's go back to what are the Jewish people doing? The Jewish people are traveling in this roundabout journey, which we're going to soon discuss where. And what happens next? God comes to Moshe, chapter 14. God comes to Moses in chapter 14 and he says to him, speak to the Israelites and tell them that they must turn back. So wherever they're going, we're making a U-turn now. We're turning back to encamp before Pi Hachirot, between Migdol and the sea, facing opposite before the idol Kabal Tzifon. You must encamp opposite, facing the sea. Okay? Camp over there facing the sea. Why? But on my part of the day show, at that time, this is God still speaking to Moses. Pharaoh will say about the Jewish people, they are trapped in the land. The desert has closed in on them. Again, these are all part of God setting the stage for Pharaoh and the Egyptian people to make this tremendous misjudgment and to chase after the Jewish people to go and get destroyed. So God is deliberately, so to say, putting them into a place where they will have no escape. The text is very, very clear. They're at a place where they cannot go not to the right, not to the left. On one side are mountains. On the other side is this big idol of the also mountain, the idol of Baal Tzifon. In front of them will be the sea. Behind them will be the Egyptians. There'll be nowhere to escape, nowhere to run. And this will be why the Egyptians will feel the opportunities here to get back our slaves and our money and all the things that we borrowed or lent, rather, to the Jewish people. Okay? What happens? Very, very quickly, the Jewish people see the Egyptians coming on the night of the sixth day of the Exodus, going into the night of the 7th day. That night, they see the Egyptians coming. The clouds that have been protecting the Jewish people go from in front of the Jews to behind the Jews to block between the Egyptians and the Jews. And all night, the Jews are praying and crying to God. And all night, the Egyptians are throwing arrows and it's going into the clouds of blue that are absorbing the arrows. The original Iron Dome. Okay, very good. Very good. The original Iron Dome. Of course, the Jewish people are also arguing at this time. What else did you do but argue during the crisis, right? And there's 4 different camps: to commit suicide, to surrender, to fight. I'm not going to get into all that now. Very interesting stuff with a lot of important life lessons. But all that was it last year's class? Or was it? I don't know. Definitely, whatever. A lot happens during that night. The ocean is complaining to God, "Why should I split?" The Egyptians are idol worshippers. The Jews are also idol worshippers. Jews weren't religious. Jews, they had Jewish names, but they were idol worshippers. But whatever. Many details. In the end, what happens? Moshe turns to Pharaoh. To God. He's praying to God. God, save us. And God says to Moshe, "Why are you crying out to me? What should you do? Raise your hand over the sea will split." And that's also a Nachshon and Aminadav walked into the water, which was, I think, last year's class. 2 years ago, we did a class on Nachshon and Aminadav. He was the first one to walk into the sea. But the point is, here's the verse that I want to show you. This is the verse that's very important. Verse 21. So, based on the instruction of God, Moses raised his arm over the sea. Raised his arm, and God drove back the sea throughout the night with a powerful east wind. All night. In the Hebrew is more powerful than the English. All night there was a ruach kodim aza. There was a powerful eastern wind. The word kodim means the eastern wind blowing, and it turned the sea into dry land, and the water split. Notice the order, by the way. What happened first? The water split or the sea was dry?
The water split.
Well, you would think logic would say what Bruce said, that the water has to split before the seabed becomes dry.
So if the water split, then it's actually pulling whatever water is on the floor out.
Right, so logic would say,
that's what I would think.
yes, logic would say that. You're making a logical statement, but if you would read the text that's right in front of you, you would see that the Bible doesn't say that. Slight problem. If you read the verse 21, it says pretty clearly, it's not like some rabbinic interpretation, it's black and white. Vayosem es hayam l'charava, he made the ocean into dry land. Oh, and then the water split. And read verse 22. The Israelites went into the midst of the sea on dry land. And the water formed a wall for them on their right and on their left. Okay? Now, there's 100 miracles, not 100. I think a list of, maybe you mentioned 50 miracles that took place with them. I don't remember. I didn't have time today to look through the list. It's not relevant, but there's so many miracles that took place, like almost you can't not share all the miracles. It's just an exciting story in Jewish history when the water splits and the water has a wall on the right and on the left side of them. If I have time, I'll tell you the spiritual meaning for that too, but I might not. The water becomes a wall on the right and the left. The children are walking through, and whatever they need, they're hungry, they're thirsty. They say, "Mommy, give me an apple," whatever. Then all of a sudden, fruit started to grow on the sides of the wall. So literally, fruits were growing, and they were thirsty. Fresh water. This is not a freshwater body of water. It's seawater, salt water, seawater. Fresh water came out of the wall. So the solid wall where the water is congealed, and water comes out. Fresh water comes out. One of the great miracles is that not only are they walking through the sea split, but as the Torah says clearly, this is important. It's going to be very important. The bed of the ocean has become dry, which is an amazing miracle. Because even if I do a miracle and I split the water for you, guess what? The water's still going to be wet. I saw an Israeli comedian. He was making jokes and saying, like, in Israel, the Houthis go out with the missiles. He's like, but the problem is it was raining. So he's outside, and all of a sudden the floor is wet. Now I'm going to get wet. Either I get wet or I get killed. Like, the whole thing, like, the fella, I'm not going to get wet. I'd rather die than be, he's like, people were standing like that. Whole thing about the rain and the missiles together are not good because you can't lie down on the floor when it's raining. The Jews would have to get dirty and get muddy when they're going through a wet ground. The sea is not a sea anymore, but the wet, right? The sea bed. So not only did God do a miracle that the sea split, God did a miracle that the bed, the floor of the sea, became dry. It was nicely paved, smooth, easy to walk on, no mud, no squishing in. Kids probably not so excited. Kids like mushy and like. But for the hills, you got to walk through on dry land, which is an amazing miracle. And we know no miracles for no reason, but this obviously helped the Jewish people. They crossed through this. God turned the sea into dry land, and the water split. Now, again, if you look carefully in verse 21, which I was pointing out to you before, it's not just that they crossed on dry land. That's verse 22. Verse 21 is that the ocean itself, the sea, was turned into dry land. There's a transformation that's taking place over here, where the sea is becoming dry. The sea is becoming dry. And this is something very, very special and very, very unique. I'll tell you one more thing, and then I'll get to the... So, how does this happen? The wind blowing all night doesn't make a sea dry, right? Wind blowing all night will maybe separate the water, but it won't make it dry. And we also know that the water wasn't just moved away. The water was congealed like walls. And in fact, there was 12 different walls. When the Jews crossed through the ocean, by the way, they didn't cross. I should point out something else important. The Jews didn't cross the ocean. They did a U-turn. They went in and came out on the same side that they went into. The only reason why the Jews entered the ocean was for the Egyptians to follow them in, so the Egyptians could be drowned. Now this was very, very important, because as long as the Egyptians had not yet been drowned, and the Jews had not seen the Egyptians being drowned, the fear of their captors, of their oppressors, of their tormentors, was still there. the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress, it's real. And the trauma and the fear that the Jews would be carrying from these Egyptian slave masters that they would come chase after them. I mean, they did chase after them. It wasn't like only hypothetical. That was a real fear. So until the Egyptians were drowned and killed, the exodus from Egypt wasn't complete. This is very, very important to understand. So the whole purpose why the Jewish people even went into the ocean was only in order that the Egyptians should follow them in, the Egyptians should get drowned, and then the Jews could continue on their journey, which is actually one of the many miracles that took place. But not only that God made the ocean dry and split and dry for the Jews, but that God sent a state of confusion into the Egyptians, that they followed the Jews into the ocean, and then God made the ocean bed not only muddy, He made it hot mud, so that the wheels of the Egyptians was melting on their chariots. The wheels were melting and falling off the chariots, and the hoofs of the horses was melting, and the animals were in pain because it was hot mud, so their hoofs were falling off, and they were jumping, like and throwing off the riders in the ocean and all that. Sound effects come on extra bonus, and they were throwing off the riders, etc., all the drama and stuff that goes with it.
Well, what about Ramses when he went into the sea, following them, but there were two fire tornadoes where he said, isn't there anybody brave enough to go through? And he just took his chariot, he went right through two fire tornadoes.
To fire tornadoes? I don't know anything about fire tornadoes. I'm not even sure what a fire tornado is, to be honest. What's a fire
Well,
tornado?
that's what they showed in the movie.
You remind me of the movie. I don't know. I never saw the movie. I only read the book. I read the book. I didn't watch the movie. They say the book is better than the movie. But you remind me of a joke, by the way. So this kid comes home from school, and his mother says, what are you doing in Hebrew school today? So we looked at the story of the Jews crossing the sea. And what happened? Says, the Jews came to the ocean, and the Jews were chasing them. And all of a sudden, Moses pulled out these inflatable bridges that he had brought with him, and they came across, and there was this platoon of soldiers that came, and there was helicopters that came and shot at the Egyptians, and the Jews were able to get across the inflatable bridges while the helicopter was shooting at the Egyptians. I'm like, what? That's what you learned in Hebrew school? She said, well, not exactly, but if I would tell you they told it in Hebrew school, you would never believe it. Anyway, there was no fire tornadoes, there was no... It is true that according to the Gemara, I think it's the Gemara, or Medrash, I think it's the Gemara, that Pharaoh himself was not drowned in the Nile River. It says, like Nishar Behem Ad Echad, that did not remain living from the Egyptians Ad Echad, until one. So Ad, as you speak Hebrew, right? Ad Echad can mean like not even one, it can mean until one, meaning one did survive. Who was the one that survived? Pharaoh. Exactly. What was Pharaoh's job? 1 second. Let me say, let's finish right when it's not as smart as you. So what happened to Pharaoh? He survived. He would then move on. He had king powers to him or whatever. He ended up becoming the king of a city called, Stein for Martian, who knows? I'll give you a hint. We read about it every year on Yom Kippur. The city of Nineveh. The city of Nineveh was a tremendous, huge metropolis that was also full of sinners. And God one day comes to the prophet Jonah, says to Jonah, the people of Nineveh are sinning, go and tell them to repent. And Jonah does not want to do it because he's afraid that they'll do it and they'll repent and they'll make the Jews look bad. So he tries escaping on a ship. Now you know the story, right? He goes on the ship, going to an island called Tarshish, and there's a storm on this ship. We're getting distracted, but whatever. The point is, they throw him off the ship. He's swallowed by a whale. He goes to Nineveh, and the king says, let's fast, put on sackcloth and ashes. He gets the entire country to do teshuvah. Why? Because this king of Nineveh, he was the original Pharaoh that had seen the splitting of the sea. And he knew the power of God. And that's why God kept him alive. And in the future, he'll be the one to make the people of Nineveh do teshuvah and repent, which is the story of Kippur. But yes, what's your question?
So this bothers me in the morning prayer.
It bothers you, yeah.
Because it says, and God drowned them, and not one of them survived. That's the exact word, not one of them survived. And I always read it and I go, but Pharaoh survived.
So that's what I said. The Hebrew word lo nishar behem ad echad, until one. That's the literal translation. Did not remain from them ad echad, until one. So the simple reading of that statement is not one survived. But you could also read it until one didn't survive. But one. Yeah, so those are the words. Those are the words. Until one.
So what's the significance of Pharaoh being one and not another one of the Egyptians being the king and doing the same thing?
Well, I guess if God's going to save only one, he's going to save the most important one, right? Why would he save Mr. I don't know, it's the Egyptian name. Like, you save the king, and the king would have the ultimate transformation is not that some regular Egyptian realized the mistake of Pharaoh and learned from it, is that Pharaoh himself would eventually be the one to do teshuvah and to publicly sit in mourning and in ashes and in sackcloth, repenting for the sins of his people, meaning that he would realize the power of God. That's the ultimate transformation that God wanted to accomplish. Is what would happen in the story of Yonah and the king of Nineveh that tradition tells us was actually that. Okay, let's go back to our story. So the wind is blowing all night. How does wind make the water become dry? According to some of the commentaries, the wind was not necessary for the miracle of splitting the sea. The wind was a decoy. It's fascinating. I think it's the Ramban. How was the wind a decoy? A decoy is a trick. I want you to think that like take a car, whatever. So you think that they left here and then really leave, that way, and they go over there. It's like to confuse you. So the whole wind, says the Ramban, was part of the trick on the Egyptians. Remember, everything God was doing was to build up to confuse the Egyptians, making the Jews go in a roundabout way, making them go into a place where they'd be trapped. So the Egyptians would chase them. Imagine you're an Egyptian and it's a beautiful clear day and you see the sea splitting wide open. What would you say? It's a miracle. The hand of God. Don't mess. God is still in charge. You wouldn't mess with God if you saw God openly splitting the sea. God brought wind all night. It's windy. The wind is blowing a strong wind. And so now when the cloud lifts in the morning, when the cloud goes from between the Jews and the Egyptians, and now the cloud goes back to the front of the Jews to go into the ocean, and all night the Egyptians heard the water and the wind and the blowing, and they see the wind is blowing, they see the water is moved out of the way. What do they think? Fire tornado or whatever else they said. I don't know, global warming, El Nino, I don't know, whatever they were saying. They found some scientific words to justify.
Tornadoes can move water like that.
Okay, so maybe it's tornado, whatever they called it. They said it's a tornado, they said it's a global warming, whatever they said. The point is, it was a decoy, but there was something that looked natural to allow the Egyptians to think that what's happening is not the hand of God. Even though in 2020 hindsight, you have to be how self-absorbed, how in denial, pun intended. How in denial do you need to be to not realize that the sea splitting is the hand of God? But they were in denial enough to think that they saw the wind all night blowing and blowing and blowing. Oh, the wind is what split the sea. It's not God that split the sea. That was part of what allowed the Egyptians to feel confident that we can chase after them because the sea is blowing. So they chased after them, even though according to the classic way of reading is that the wind blew all night, and that actually was because of the wind that held the water up. Anyway, the Jews crossed in and out the same way. The Egyptians go in, they're drowned, and afterwards they're standing on the seashore. The Jews are afraid, they're worried what happened to the Egyptians. Maybe they went somewhere else. So God did another miracle, and the ocean spit up all of the dead bodies and all the chariots of the Egyptians, which we know when people went to war back then, the custom was you wanted to show you were so confident in victory, you went with jewels and gold and silver on your chariots and on your armor and on your helmet. So the Jews were busy collecting all the wealth. And the Egyptian army, so Moshe kind of forced them to continue traveling along to Mount Sinai. Okay.
And you said God buried them.
Yeah, so it actually says that,
That's why
yeah.
it's so important for non-Jews as well.
Yeah, you are correct. The Egyptians were buried. This was a repayment from God to them. Since they allowed the Jews to be buried, they were also buried. And yeah, the earth swallowed them up, and they were swallowed up. Okay. So where is this Yam Suf? I was going to talk about this. It took us a half hour just for the introduction. I got a little distracted. And I still have the Hasidic part, the me in the Bible, the me story. So we'll spend like 3 minutes. We won't go so in depth into this, just very, very briefly. Where is the Yam Suf? So many people will tell you the Yam Suf is the Red Sea. I believe that that's the most common translation today in English. If you type Jews splitting, what sea split will be the Red Sea? Now, where is the Red Sea? So I have here one map. So the Red Sea, this is actually not the best map. I took this from another website. I'm going to get to in a minute. The Red Sea is actually here in the middle. Actually, if you're watching online, I'm going to share my screen in a second. There's the Red Sea here on the bottom. 1 second. Let me just share my screen for those that are watching.
Do you want a color one?
I have one on my, yeah, you got to give me a color one, yeah, please. You want to pass one? Yeah. Thank you. So if you can see, here's Egypt over here. Here's Israel going up this way. Sorry, other way around. Here's Israel's up this way. Sorry, Israel's going up this way. The Jews are in Goshen. Israel's all the way up here. Okay, Israel's barely even in the map. The very top, which says Canaan. That's where you're going up over there. Now here you have. This is the Mediterranean. This is.
So maybe they really went to the Mediterranean.
No, not the Mediterranean. It wasn't the Mediterranean. No one says it's the Mediterranean. But so which? Now the Red Sea is down here. The Red Sea is this down on the bottom. There's two gulfs that come out of the Red Sea. Gulf of Suez, or the Suez Gulf, and the Gulf of Aqaba. Okay? So this one, I'm showing those who are watching on my screen. This, where my mouse is, this one is the Gulf of Suez, and this one is the Gulf of Aqaba. Okay? Well, and Eilat is over here. This is Eilat. You can see on the screen where Eilat is over here. Which is Etam. That's where Eilat is, right over there. And I didn't put it into the text, but there's basically a verse in the book Kings, in the very beginning of chapter 9, Shlomo HaMelech, where it says that King Solomon built a fleet of ships at Etzion Gaver, which is near Eilat, on the shore of the Yam Suf in the land of Edom. Which, according to that verse in the book of Kings, describing how Shlomo HaMelech built his ships at Eilat, next to the land of Edom, which is going to be this land right over here, Midian, Edom over here. So this is going to be Eilat. Sorry, yeah, this is going to be Eilat over here, and that's the sea, Yam Suf. And in the book of Kings, it's called Yam Suf. So we have over here what seems to be a pretty clear indication that the Yam Suf is the Gulf of Aqaba, which is this called the Red Sea in English because it's a gulf that comes out of the Red Sea, and that is where the splitting of the sea took place, somewhere over here, south of Israel, and that's when God turned them around to the land of Edom, because the land afterwards, you see where Mount Sinai is on the map, here, Mount Sinai, this whole area is Edom, etc., going towards the land of Midian, the land of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, etc. Following that? What's the only problem with that explanation? There's no reeds over there. It's dry. There's no fresh water to allow any reeds to grow. And the word Suf means reeds. So to call the Gulf of Aqaba the Sea of Reeds, Yam Suf, doesn't really make sense. So some will say that from the word Sea of Reeds, it was translated to Red Sea, and that's the Gulf of Aqaba from the Red Sea, but it's not really an accurate translation, even though there is a Red Sea or a Gulf of Aqaba that is also called Yam Suf, doesn't fit. Some say that the word Suf means Soif. What is Soif? The same Hebrew letters, Samach, Vav, Pei, could spell suf, reeds, or if you just change the vowel, instead of being a u, a kubus, to be a cholam, it's sof. What does sof mean? The end. So the yam, sof, the yam, the ocean at the end of the land of Israel. And in fact, in a different verse which describes the territory of the land of Israel, you have from the Mediterranean, you have from the Kinneret going down, one sea, till the sea at the end of the land of Israel, which is a lot, is the Yam Sof, the Yam at the end. So the Gulf of Aqaba could be the body of water we're talking about. That is at the end. And by the way, okay, that's one main theory. The sea that was split is somewhere in the middle of the Gulf of Aqaba. It wasn't at the very end, near Eilat, obviously, because they could have just gone around it. It had to be further in, and that's. I'm not okay. I should just tell you, there's not one clear opinion what it is. I should have said this first, actually. There is no clarity on where exactly is the Red Sea. There's many different opinions. There is no one consensus that this is the place. Okay? Just so you know. So what I'm telling you now is a theory. It's just a theory. It may be right, it may not be right.
Has like sea levels changed and the geology?
There's a lot more to share. This is what I was reading, and it's like there's so much. There's so much. But according to this theory, where the sea, when we talk about the Yam Suf, we're not talking about a sea of reeds at all. There's no reeds. We're talking about the Gulf of Aqaba, which is this body of water called the Gulf of Aqaba that comes off of the Red Sea. That's what we're talking about, and that is the somewhere in the middle of there is where the splitting of the sea took place. And after they crossed that, heading toward, or they went back around on the same side of the wilderness, so they went back, they went in and out on the same side and traveled up, around, and back down south towards Mount Sinai. You understand? 49 days, but they were traveling. So they're somewhere here, according to this theory, they're somewhere here by this Gulf of Aqaba. Okay? They go in and out on the same side, according to the classic commentaries. They now continue up north, go around, which is going to be Kadesh over there, up on the top. Go around the Gulf of Aqaba and come down over here. There's going to be Mount Sinai right over there. If you follow that. Okay? There's another theory that it's a body of in a place called Qa'al al-Jafar in the Jordanian desert, which is part of the Jordanian Heights, where there used to be a big ocean, a big lake that dried up. It still fills in, so that's where you have fresh water, and that can be super. There's one more really, really interesting theory, which was discovered by a man called Ron White. And there's more to share, but I'm going to spend just 1 minute or 2 minutes on this, and then we go further. So in 1978, Ron White, who is a very controversial archaeologist, some people will tell you that he's a pseudo fake, whatever, and some people tell you he has excellent proof or whatever, it's he's very controversial. So I'm telling you off the bat, what I'm going to tell you now is it's a theory that some people don't accept. But he has a lot of proof to his theory, many different arguments that make it seem like a good argument. And I saw a whole PowerPoint with a whole video, like a 45-minute video, and I saw a PowerPoint with pictures. But point is, he says that it was the Gulf of Suez over here, in a place called, where is it over here? In a place called New Iba, Nuweiba. It's by the Gulf of Aqaba. Anyway, the whole theory he has where there's a land bridge there. People argue if there is a land bridge or isn't a land bridge. Basically, he shows pictures of the crossing to get there. It's in between a mountain pass, which fits the verses, because the verses describe they were traveling and they were trapped on the mountains on one side and an ancient idol on the other side. He shows archaeological shrine of a temple on one side, and you see pictures of the path. And there's a big open area where a million Jews could have encamped, waiting to cross the ocean in between the desert, whatever. It's a very interesting theory. If you have time, you can look it up afterwards. His name is Ron Wyatt. Just Google Ron Wyatt Red Sea, and you'll see videos will come up and you'll be able to see, very well done documentary on it. Anyway, that's enough for WYATT. Ron, I'm telling you that there's no consensus amongst religious historians. I was looking into this yesterday and today. I was researching, and I know some religious people say this is what it is, and they teach it. I know others that will tell you it's not, he's not an authentic historian. He made up other things. He claims to have found he has too many things he found to be considered reliable by some people. So not everyone holds it.
Is this the one that they found wheels and?
Yes. So and again, I don't have time, but in that area in the ocean, if you go diving, they found wheels of chariots there, and there's a land bridge there. And there's a lot of things that seem to justify saying that this is.
Do you think they were put there on purpose?
I don't know. I'm not.
Okay.
Anyway, what did I really want to share tonight?
You love teaching.
What?
You love teaching.
Well, thank you. I do love teaching. That's true. So what I want to really teach you is not the history, although history is fascinating. What I really want to tell you is what's the story for us, right? In the sea splitting, when we read about the sea splitting, it's not just the story of a sea splitting. It's a story of some tremendous divine revelation that's relevant to each and every one of us in our own lives. That was part of the journey of the Jewish people to go to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. And in fact, I won't have time to get into each and every one of the details, but all the details of the miracles of the water being a wall on the right and the left, and the water being dry land, many details of the fruit growing out of the thing, all of these, of the wind blowing all night, these are all part of a tremendous spiritual experience that happened to the Jewish people at the moment of the splitting of the sea. In fact, the Talmud tells us a very famous statement that a maidservant at the splitting of the sea was able to see a greater revelation of godliness than the prophet Ezekiel. The prophet Ezekiel is very well known for a famous prophecy. What was his prophecy? The chariot. One of the most Kabbalistic and spiritual, esoteric of all prophecies in Tanakh is the vision of what's called the Markava in Hebrew. The chariot, I don't know if I get distracted, it's a very spiritual, the Merkava, with the four faces and the 12 angels holding it up, and on top of the chariot is the throne of God's glory. And Yechezkel says he saw the heavens open, he saw this vision of the Markava, of the chariot, with the throne on top. The maids at Mount Sinai, at the splitting of the sea, the maids saw more than Yechezkel saw. That's how great the revelation of God was at that moment. So what happened? In simple English, the ocean became dry land. What does ocean represent spiritually, and what does dry land represent spiritually? So in Kabbalah, this terminology is as follows. The ocean represents a world of concealment, or in Kabbalistic language, an alma de iskasia, an olam, a world of concealment, hisoy, to be covered, or in Aramaic, alma de iskasia, and dry land represents alma de iskalia, a world of revelation. And we can understand simply why this is. Everything that exists on dry land also exists in the ocean, but more so. You have trees and flowers and things growing on dry land. If you go to the ocean, it's not just a swimming pool of tile and water. There's trees and reefs and coral and algae, and there's more life growing in the ocean. So many things growing in the ocean, just like if it was on land, but it's just you don't see it because it's under the ocean. And just like you have animals on the land, you have animals in the ocean. Many, many, many kinds of animals. From small little tadpoles and fish and schools of fish and sharks and sea lions and I don't know how many different forms of marine life there are, but there's a tremendous amount of marine life, all underwater. So whatever exists on dry land exists in the ocean. The only difference is, on dry land, we see it. So if there's a cat walking on dry land, you see this cat. If there's a whale, massive whale, weighs, I don't know how much does a whale weigh, 5 tons or whatever they weigh. Not my stuff. Yeah, for a 5-ton whale going on, you could be on the boat 8 inches away from it. Not 8 inches, whatever you won't see. So whatever is there exists. It's just in a way of concealment. So why is it concealed? So I will say, for the sake of transparency, that in Kabbalah it gives 2 different explanations. One is that it's concealed because it's too great to be revealed. That's one explanation. But I'm going to go with the other explanation given for tonight's class, which is that the concealment represents when God is hiding himself so you can't see divinity in the world. So we know you have worlds of revelation, so a world where God is manifest to some degree, where you can feel and you can see and you can sense the divine energy that exists in that world. Then you have the heavens that are a concealment. And after that, in our world, what do we see? Garnished. Nothing. You go onto a boat, you can be floating under the ocean. What a complex. There's nothing to see for miles. You're in denial. If you think, we're back to the denial. If you think there's nothing to see, like, you just don't have the ability to see it because you're lying on your back on your boat, sun tanning. But if you be able to see right below you, directly under you, is, who knows, there could be 1,000 fish right below you. So it's there, but you can't see it.
If you want to see it, go on a glass bottom boat.
Yeah, go get scuba diving equipment and go down, get into a submarine.
That we can't see cat in the ocean if you like.
You're right. By the way, once you learn how to look in the ocean, once you realize I should pay attention to what's going on, and you get glasses to look underwater, you go scuba diving, snorkeling, you'll see it, and you'll be like, "Wow, this is amazing." I mean, everyone above ground doesn't even understand what you're talking about. So
people talk about like scuba diving. It's unbelievable what you see, but you know what? That same thing is here on the earth. We just don't put on our right glasses.
Beautiful. You're right. There's actually a lot we can develop this. I'm thinking more. I've gone scuba diving, and scuba diving actually is very interesting. That maybe also I'm an amateur. I only went twice, but you see the fish right, you think you're gonna touch it, it's really far away from your whole sense of perception and depth is totally off. Because as you said correctly, you see much further in the water. But so you think it's right here, and it's really not. You're little disoriented. And so that's what we are like when we put on scuba diving gear and start studying Kabbalah and Hasidic philosophy and start looking at the spiritual realities that are hidden underwater. And we have access to. Today we have technology to go underwater. Today we have submarines. We can go deep into the wisdom of Kabbalah.
If you go scuba diving, you have to be very careful where you're going, because you may encounter a shark. That's why
By the way, when you study Kabbalah, you got to be very careful where you're going to. Some people study Kabbalah, they don't know where they're going, they're just exploring the wild west of the ocean, and they end up being devoured by a shark and end up going up the deep end, and they don't know where they're going. 100%. But the point is, so we come with our human, earthly sense of depth and perception, and we're trying to apply our earthly perception onto spiritual realities, not realizing we're in a whole different realm of reality, and that the language of physical touch and it's the wrong kind of language. It's a lot here. Anyway, it's a good thought. Now let's develop it more, but let's go back to what I was in the middle of saying. The point is, there's a world of revelation and a world of concealment. By the way, the Hebrew word for nature, what's the Hebrew word for nature? Teva, is from the same word of mutba, to be sunk. When something is sunk, why is nature called nature? Because God is sunk into nature. Nature is really a miracle of God. The only thing is a miracle that happened yesterday, it happened the day before yesterday, it happened 3 days ago, 4 days ago, 5 days ago. So we've become so accustomed and we're so used to seeing this miracle happen on a daily basis, we no longer get excited by seeing the miracle. But really, what's a miracle? Really, what is nature? The teva, the nature, is the sunkenness of God, where God is hidden and embedded and, deep, deep within the physical realm of our existence, and we don't see it. It's sunk into the water, and all we see is a smooth water. We think it's a beautiful day, oblivious to the tremendous divine energy that's there. So, why would God make a world that's concealed? Why would God create an alma de escasia? Why would he make an ocean? If you were God, wouldn't you want the world to see you, to know you, to appreciate you? Exactly right. I mean, it's a very basic idea. If God would have only created dry land, then anytime you would see anything, you'd see God. And that would take away the whole purpose of existence, which really I wanted to describe more, but I don't have the time for it. The whole objective of God creating us was to see how we search for Him, how we look for Him, how we try to find our own connection to Him, which you can only do if if we feel disengaged from Him. As long as we feel like a young child in the love of their mother. A young child is too dependent on their mother to ever find a way to be independent. You have to develop that, to learn that. And so God had to create a world of concealment to allow us to not feel dependent on God, in order for us to have a free choice to find God, to connect to God, etc., etc., etc. In Kabbalah, this is called tzimtzum, concealment, contraction, for God, so to say, hid Himself from the world, so we wouldn't feel Him, so we'd have free choice. But is this contraction real? Of course not. Did God actually take Himself out of the world? No, I'm telling you deep ideas of Chassidus now, and I'm saying it quickly, but God is not in the world. He's just hidden Himself in a way that we don't perceive it. God, and again, this requires lots of explanation, but you'll accept the premise. The facts are that God is very much present in the world, but God has enabled His presence to be hidden in a way that we can be here, oblivious to the fact that we are surrounded by Him and God is everything and everywhere, just like we are looking at the ocean, oblivious to what's going on underneath the water. So that's the reality of the world in which we live, an alma de iskasia, a world of the ocean, a world of concealment, a world where God has hidden Himself that we can't see God. Now, Jewish people are getting ready to go to Mount Sinai, going to receive the Torah. Before we receive the Torah, what's going to happen at Mount Sinai? We're going to make a covenant with God. We're going to see God, and then we'll hear God talking to us and all that. So as preparation for us receiving the Torah, what did God do? God turned the ocean to dry land. God allowed the concealment to become exposed. He allowed that which is normally ocean, that which is normally concealment, that which is normally opaque and blocks us from seeing and perceiving godliness to become openly accessible, visible. It's Alma de Escalia. It's dry land. It's openly, easily seen. At that moment of the splitting of the sea, what happened? There was no more ocean. There was no more concealment of God. At that moment, God is revealed the same way a tree is revealed on dry land. God is revealed. That's what it means. It says in the verse that the ocean became dry land. How did this happen? And I'm not going to get to the walls right now because it's going to be too complicated. But how did this happen? What does the verse tell us? Yeah, how did the land turn dry? What had to happen for the water to become dry? We mentioned it already. We talked about it. What did God do to make it look like the ocean was splitting? The wind. The Ruach Kodem all night there was a wind blowing. We already talked about this wind. Did God need wind to make a miracle happen? No. So I already explained to you in a more simple, interesting level with a decoy. To confuse the Egyptians to think that they could chase us, God made the wind blow. What's the Ruach Kodim? The eastern wind from a deep spiritual perspective? The word Kadim, east, can also be the word Kedem, which means Before, kadima, forward, kadmon. There's a ruach kadmon shel olam, kadmono shel olam, which means the one who preceded the world. The spirit, the ruach. See, the ruach is the wind blowing, and the ruach is the spirit of the kadmon shel olam, the spirit of that which preceded creation. What's the spirit of that which preceded creation? What's the spirit of that which preceded creation? The essence of God that wanted to allow us to be separate from Him. At that moment, God revealed that spirit of God that existed before concealment. That spirit of God that existed at the very beginning when God said, I'm going to make children. Just like a mother said, I'm going to make a child. And then the mother will feed the child, love the child, care for the child. Until one day she tells the child, you got to figure it out. The original spirit of God that existed from before the world is what's hinted to in the words that there was a ruach kadim azakolah, a powerful east wind. Or, in Kabbalistic words, the spirit of that which preceded the world. And all of that night and all that darkness and all that concealment only came because of the desire of God to allow us to exist in a world where we feel separate, we feel concealment, we feel independence from God, to allow us free choice. And this is what happened at the moment of the splitting of the sea. God exposed Himself, so to say, His primordial self in fancy English. Primordial self is a fancy word for Himself before there was a world, the original state of God. God revealed Himself, and when that happened, the ocean became dry. That which was normally concealing God and opaque, suddenly it itself became a place of revelation, of divine expression, of divine revelation. To prepare us that when we come to Mount Sinai, we'll be able to see God and understand that our struggle, our independence, our confusion is part of God's original plan for us to use the light of the Torah to find God. You understand? To prepare us for the receiving of the Torah, God had to split the sea. Not just that He had to drown the Egyptians and we had to cross because we couldn't get from this side of the Gulf of Aqaba or whatever to that side. The whole splitting of the sea, it all happened on a physical dimension. But at the same time that this physical miracle was taking place, a far, 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 far greater miracle was taking place. The original primordial spirit of God's spirit, from before Tzimtzum, from before concealment, from before hidden, from before any level of darkness, I know I said this is a little bit fast, that was exposed. And the moment that was exposed, even before the wind blew away anything, at that moment the ocean, the water itself had become dry. The ocean itself, the concealment, now you saw that the concealment was really also God. You're able to see that the concealment is also God. Why? So when we come to Mount Sinai, we'll understand that our covenant with God is that in our state of concealment, in our search, now we have the light, now we have the technology, now we have the ability to look underground, underwater. It's for us as independent beings in a state of concealment to on our own find God. And that's what happened with that's the real story. The real story of the splitting of the sea. And for us, obviously, the lesson for us is we need to find within ourselves moments that we can go underground or underwater and to connect to that level of God, the primordial spirit of God that made the concealment, and to find that even within the concealment, that ocean, it's also God. And so to say, split our own sea, and to find the dry land within the ocean, to find God within the concealment. That's the story, my friends. Got it? Hope it wasn't too deep. It's beautiful stuff, I'm saying. And there's more, but whatever. Anyway, this is enough for tonight. And more was for sure well with the ocean. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Lifsha. Alice. Oh, Alice, yeah. Thank you, Carmen. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, Maria Ramirez. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Steve. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you, Joe. Thank you everyone around the globe. Welcome from Olympia. Hello, Mara Kogan. Hello, David. Lila Tov. Hello, Diane. Thank you, Dorochana. Beautiful name, Dorochana. Hello, Wais. Hello, Judd. Oh, Art. Hello, you all. Okay. Lila Tov. Next week, same time, same place, same channel, same entertainer, new buffet. Next week will be French cuisine and new topic. I don't know what it'll be just yet. Maybe some new jokes, maybe not. If you behave, let's hope so. I had a few new ones today. Thank you, Art. You should go up to you too. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Andrea. Yes. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. I mean, probably logistical. They wanted to prepare to like the surprise. No, you don't know what you're going to see backstage. You don't know what the stage will look like. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thank you, Jessica. 1 second. Good night, everyone. Thank you, Ariella. Adal. We all enjoyed. See you, B'ezras Hashem, next week, Monday night. And if you want to join us at JLI next Tuesday, for the experience of learning Gemara, God willing.